I first learned about the climate emergency at our school. Mr. Green told us the world is burning up.
As humans continue to use fossil fuels, the world is getting hotter and hotter. There will be more dangerous heat waves, more drought, more wildfires. Deserts will spread, food production will fall, and millions will starve. Hurricanes and tornadoes will be more frequent and more violent. Sea ice caps, and glaciers are disappearing. Sea levels are rising faster and faster, several meters by the end of the century. Already, low-lying islands are disappearing under the waves, and the islanders have to evacuate, joining millions of climate refugees.
By now, I'm pretty sure that I'm supposed to be scared, and sure enough, some of my friends seem to be. But is there really a climate emergency? I mean, look outside. It's another beautiful day out there. Clean air, water, beautiful lakes, mountains, and forests. There may be distant problems in faraway places, but I'm just not seeing them here. Now, after trying to scare the pants off a bunch of kids, Mr. Green went to full scare.
Global heating is caused by greenhouse gases that trap heat in the atmosphere, and humans are producing those gases. Methane from gas wells, farming, and gassy cows. Carbon dioxide pouring out of tailpipes and smokestacks, making oceans more and more acid. If there are more and more humans using more and more fossil fuels and more plastics and eating more and more meat, the rising temperature will reach a tipping point into runaway global heating, a self-accelerating, irreversible spiral of feedback loops, leading to the loss of millions of species. And that includes us. We will go extinct by 2030 if we don't act now. It is do or die.
Really? 11 years. Really?
We have to treat climate change as the greatest emergency since World War II.
What? Worse than bombed, flattened cities and 60 million people dead? Now, I wonder what our veterans would think about that. Why was this guy really trying to scare us? Imagine already having the worries and the depressions of an average teenager, and then on top of that, being told that you have no future. Sorry, your parents really screwed up, because the world's ending June 15th, 2030. But then, when everything seemed so gloomy, Mr. Green gave us hope.
All we have to do is slash greenhouse gases 60% by 2030 and to 0% by 2050. And all we have to do is stop using coal, oil, and gas, stop using fossil fuel vehicles, stop oil drilling, fracking, pipelines, and tankers. Produce our electricity from free, clean, renewable wind and solar. Stop unnecessary air travel, like vacations. Stop cutting down trees. Stop eating meat. And have fewer children.
Wow, the answer was simple after all. Just stop everything and do it now. A choice to either give up the world or give up my life. By now I think I was supposed to be scared, but I wasn't. I was angry. I wasn't angry at my parents for leaving me in a dark, hopeless world. I was angry at Mr. Green for saying some pretty far out, end the world, doom and gloom stuff. Before asking me to completely change my life, shouldn't he back up his claims? With some facts and figures, not just a pile of scary pictures? It had all the signs of a scam. A gullible audience, an argument from authority, speaking about an unknown future, with great certainty. Don't give us the facts, so we can't make our own decisions. Use of fear.
We're all gonna die.
Offer salvation.
Just do as I tell you.
Put on a deadline.
Act now or else.
Bullying.
It's global warming, stupid.
Shut down debate.
It's settled science.
Get angry when questioned.
It's settled science!
Well, can't argue with somebody who shouts louder than me. Climate predictions use many computer models, each supercomputer calculating a different future. Only one computer model, the one with the smallest temperature increases, is even close to the actual balloon and satellite observations. Doomsters like to take the most extreme model predictions to spread their fear. Does that sound like settled science to you? Can Mr. Green be so sure that our future is hopeless? There are some celebrities that agree with him. They seem to think that the worst case predictions of computer models are more real than the actual world. There's Prince Charles, who recently predicted only 18 months left. Only a year and a half? And he said this in July. Well, I better get out there and do something with my life. Or not. Over 10 years ago, he predicted time would be up in 8 years. When that didn't seem to be working out, he extended the end times to 35 years. Now back to the scary short, do it now timeline. How about Al Gore, known best for his Inconvenient Truth movie, predicting disasters caused by a warming climate? He inconveniently had 9 major errors in his movie. Al has made several predictions of climate disasters. Inconveniently, all have failed. Then there's Leonardo DiCaprio, who flies to climate change conferences all around the world in his private jet to lecture the poor folk about their large carbon footprints. The United States has a new congresswoman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has been promoting the Green New Deal. Over a year ago, she predicted that the world will end in 12 years if we don't act now. Then she predicted that Florida will soon disappear under the waves if we don't adopt the Green New Deal. She wants to replace fossil fuels and nuclear with wind and solar, then give everyone free education, healthcare, and housing. A nice fantasy, but a fantasy that will cost trillions. Speaking to the press, her chief of staff said,
"The interesting thing about the Green New Deal is it wasn't originally a climate thing at all. Do you guys think of it as a climate thing? Because we really think of it as a how do you change the entire economy thing."
The trouble with radical changes is that they produce radical unintended changes. What do a prince, a politician, an actor, and a bartender all have in common? Well, it's obviously not science. There are some scientists, like David Suzuki, the most trusted man in Canada. He said politicians should be jailed for denying the science of climate change, even though he had not checked the evidence for himself and wasn't even aware of a 15-year pause in global temperature. Not very sciencey to throw those who don't agree with you in jail, especially when you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, Dr. Suzuki is a geneticist and a TV host. There is, however, a well-known climate scientist, an unnamed man who in a very unscientific manner slaps lawsuits on those who disagree with him. Using tree rings and corals, a lot of emails, and doubtful statistics, he fabricated a graph that shows unprecedented warming in our century. But somehow, the hockey stick graph left out the medieval and Roman warming periods, and was quietly dropped by the IPCC. 10 years later, even after being ordered by a Canadian court, he still refuses to show his data. Science is not a single paper or graph. Observations only become science when they are repeatable and keep on pointing to similar results. Nagged on by high-profile climate doomsters and radicals gluing themselves to the road. Several countries, including the UK, France, Germany, and Canada, have declared climate emergencies. But is there really a climate emergency, or is it exaggerated to bring about political changes? A climate scientist who recently reversed his ideas on climate science said,
"The only way to get our society to truly change is to frighten people with the possibility of a catastrophe."
Is the fear of climate change being used to panic us into changing our way of life? A former Canadian Minister of the Environment said,
"No matter if the science of global warming is all phony, climate change provides the greatest opportunity to bring about justice and equality in the world."
Is the climate emergency phony? Is it fake news to fool you into doing what somebody else believes is the right thing? The BBC reports a chief environmental scientist as saying,
"People must use less transport, eat less red meat and buy fewer clothes if the UK is to virtually halt greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. But eventually some form of compulsion or rationing will be necessary, if climate targets are to be met."
Translation, we commoners will be forced into poverty, all for some exaggerated and arbitrary climate policies. A UK House of Commons committee announced,
"In the long term, widespread personal vehicle ownership does not appear to be compatible with significant decarbonization."
Yup, no cars for us, riffraff.
When they ultimately find themselves being told what they can and cannot consume, where they can travel and what foods they are allowed to eat, they will be furious about the way they have been misled.
You think? How angry will you be when you have given up your wealth and health, and then to find out it's all been a scam? Do you really think the world you're inheriting is that bad? Are your parents leaving you in a worse world than the one they have inherited from their parents? Although you might not hear about it, there is some good news out there. A lot of good news. Our advancing civilization depends on energy. The recent rapid increase in wealth and technology has largely been driven by the sun's energy, stored in the earth millions of years ago as fossil fuels. Over the past 200 years, this ancient solar energy has allowed us to replace slaves, horses, child labor, and hand labor with machines that do our bidding. And give us a lifestyle undreamed of a century ago. Global energy use has been increasing, and with it, the global quality of life has been increasing. Agricultural productivity has been increasing, with less land needed to grow the same amount of food. With improving wealth and productivity, education and literacy have increased. Nutrition and health have increased. And life expectancy has increased. Child mortality has decreased. Poverty has decreased. And famine has decreased. Even the likelihood of dying in natural disasters has gone down, as increasingly wealthier people have become better able to protect themselves from storms and floods. In the 1960s, some people actually thought this was bad news. With increasing wealth and food, the population of the world was rapidly going up. And by extending graphs, some thought that the world would soon overpopulate. With famine and a breakdown of law and order in the 70s, then that didn't occur. Mass starvation in the 90s. Now the doom and gloom has been postponed to, we're all gonna die, in 2030. professor of population studies infamously said,
Giving society cheap, abundant energy would be the equivalent of giving an idiot child a machine gun.
even after a lifelong series of failed, then renewed doomsday predictions, he still has a lot of followers. There are some influential followers in the United Nations. The president of the UN Foundation said,
We've got to ride this global warming issue. Even if the theory of global warming is wrong, we will be doing the right thing in terms of economic and environmental policy.
doing the right things for the wrong reasons. The old ends justifying the lies. The founder of the UN Environmental Program said,
Isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about?
so better to take risks that millions could die, just so he can experiment with his own version of utopia? Perhaps it is the belief that increasing health and wealth will lead to uncontrollable population explosion that has long delayed the development of Asia and Africa, resulting in millions of unnecessary deaths. The first executive director of the Sierra Club said,
Childbearing should be a punishable crime against society, unless the parents hold a government license. All potential parents should be required to use contraceptive chemicals, the government issuing antidotes to citizens chosen for childbearing.
would you want the government to decide if and when you're going to have children? Who do they choose? Would you be jailed or worse for having an illegal baby? One young woman at a rally wrote, "Stop breeding," on her sign. She said she was looking for a doctor to get a hysterectomy, so that she could not have kids. Imagine these green creatures scaring young women into not having kids. Have they no shame? A few poor countries, largely in Africa and Asia, still have high population growth. It is now thought that making people wealthier and healthier doesn't cause unchecked population growth, but gives parents the opportunity to limit the size of their families. Current trends in fertility rates show that the overall world population will stop growing in about 2100, and actually start to decrease after that. Abundant, cheap energy launched the modern era, and to create and sustain better lifestyles for a future population of about 10 billion, we need an abundant, inexpensive energy supply with little environmental impact. And the good news is that we have the time, so that we can continue our slow but steady progress, and we don't have to make sudden, foolish decisions. Even when fossil fuels become scarce, we can have a powerful, constant supply of almost inexhaustible, safe, clean energy if we choose to develop nuclear. So although you might disagree with some of what I've said, there is a lot of good news. But what is the bad news? So bad that we have to act as if our house is on fire? So bad that we have to give up our lifestyles and try out an untested economic fantasy that may turn out to be an economic nightmare? The burning of fossil fuels releases carbon dioxide into the air. This clear, colorless, safe gas, only 0.04% of the atmosphere, might be the cause of an increase in the Earth's temperature of about 1 degree Celsius over the past century. And this might cause more storms, or fewer storms, more droughts, or fewer droughts, more fires, or fewer fires, though the evidence for any of this is weak. Since the 1800s, long before CO2 could have affected the climate, sea levels have continued to rise, but not by much. Low-lying islands might flood, but probably not. Ice caps are melting and refreezing. They are predicted, but unobserved, mass extinctions. Are these weak and vague climate changes really emergencies? Are they so dangerous that we need immediate action? Immediate impulsive actions that throw away the very fossil fuels and nuclear energy that have given us wealthier, healthier, higher quality, and longer lives than our grandparents could have ever imagined. There are true believers out there who want to stampede you into making manipulated decisions with unrealistic, short deadlines and use children to broadcast the message. Like Greta Thunberg, scaring kids into skipping school.
I want you to feel the fear I feel every day, and then I want you to act. I want you to act as you would in a crisis. I want you to act as if our house is on fire.
Scolding governments.
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering, people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing.
Using icy stares and pointy fingers to guilt-trip politicians.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is the money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
If only she didn't smirk after saying these things, we might think she actually believes them. Surely she knows how good she has it. But perhaps in Sweden they don't teach how previous generations have worked and fought to end ignorance, poverty, child labor, slavery, disease, malnutrition, fascism, and totalitarianism. How their parents have worked to clean the environment, protect species, end wars, and improve the quality and enjoyment of life. To give the next generation, their children, advantages they never had. Greta's generation, our generation, is the wealthiest, healthiest, best clothed, best fed, best educated, most entertained there's ever been. Hopefully, not the most thankless there's ever been. Do we really need to act as if the house is on fire, or can we slowly adapt to a climate that has always changed and will continue to change? In the next video, I will explore evidence that help me make my own decisions. Science has a history of overthrowing the most tempting of fundamentalist beliefs, with a few unappealing facts. But don't just take my word for it. Watch, read, and think for yourself. After all, why on earth would you believe a 16-year-old?